Hello and welcome to Cube News. I'm J. Douglas Barker. With civil war building in Iraq and violence raging between Lebanon and Israel, images of death and destruction have become commonplace in media outlets around the world. And in the midst of this horror and devastation, all sides concerned have spent considerable energy managing what can only be considered their own public relations campaigns, glorifying their righteousness in the blood of innocents. So what's going on? More than just religious intolerance, obviously. A few examples. In Iraq recently, a farmer was killed and the market where the farmer sold his vegetables was firebombed by a private militia of a local conservative Muslim cleric. The farmer's crime? He had arranged his produce in a manner that was deemed suggestive by the cleric. In another village, herders were killed by the village cleric's death squad because the herders had refused to put diapers on their goats. Goats, for those of you who have not spent time on the farm, go around with their tails up, exposing thereby their nether parts. The local cleric had decided that such a display might incite the repressed passions of the local populace and turn their hearts from God. I promise you, we're not making this up. Look at any country who has been led by a dictator. The dictator was never a good leader. Their economic policies were always a disaster. The people were always unhappy. Society was always stagnant. So how did the despot stay in power? By following a few simple steps. First, the potential leader must be able to manage a decent public relations campaign. And secondly, he must be able to identify and recruit people into his loyalty, young men who are not squeamish about violence. With these in hand, he can then do step 3, which is to intimidate the existing leadership into giving him a seat at the table of municipal power. From there, the potential despot can rise through the ranks and on the way make all kinds of laws, more laws than anyone could possibly follow. Then, using his now well-established personal militia, he enforces his new laws both fiercely and at random. The randomness is important because that's what keeps the populace off balance. The continuance of a good PR campaign will go a long ways towards keeping the populace from an uprising, but eventually the natives will get restless and the despot will have to go to the final tried and true. To keep the people behind him, the now imperiled dictator will need an enemy. And for the past 100 years or so, the Jews have been the enemy of choice for a great many desperate despots. This is not to say that the Jews of Israel have been blameless in the political conflicts past or present. They have had their share of bad apples, crooked politicians and short-sighted decision makers, just like everyone else. But throughout history, people have fallen for the blame the Jews line so totally that they've been blinded to background events. Fascists have always been better at public relations than Hebrews. And the world sits now in confusion while a small group of wealthy individuals follow exactly the playbook of the Nazis. Adolf Hitler, remember, was not seen by the world as a bad guy early in his career. Even though he was a murderous rogue, he was feeding his people and reforming the economy and leading his country out of the wilderness. At least that's what they said. And so we see it again, the recruitment of murderers into private militias. Bizarre laws, fiercely and randomly enforced. The selection of an ethnic minority as an enemy, and a small, innocuous-looking leader, spewing fanatic hate wherever he goes. The Jews may not be blameless in this current crisis, but no Israeli politician anywhere is calling for the annihilation of an entire country, population, and culture. The Arabs of the Middle East do have legitimate concerns and honest grievances with the West, and we'll get into those on our next broadcast. What we are seeing from Iran now, however, is not a legitimate political response to any Arab concern. We encourage you to find out for yourself what's going on. Read in-depth histories. Listen to unbiased reports. Don't become a pawn in someone else's public relations campaign. Think about it. Why did a huge crowd of protesters in Indonesia recently have signs that were pre-printed in English? Who was running that show? History will repeat itself only if we let it. That's our perspective on the news. For Cube News, this is J. Douglas Barker.